Morning, everyone, and welcome to another formal meeting of Cabinet on Tuesday, 3rd of October. The meeting's been streamed on the Council's YouTube channel, so welcome to watching by YouTube. There may well be some councillors that are part of the Cabinet or wider executive who aren't able to join the meeting in person and will be joining remotely. As then an item for second a motion or vote. Attendance will not be officially recorded, but I am happy to take any questions, items that we're going to be considering this morning. With regards to some of the meeting formalities and etiquette, if you could kindly indicate that you wish to speak by raising your hand, or if you're on Zoom by using the hand symbol dashboard, which I think is on the bottom of your screen. And as a reminder, please can I ask members and officers to introduce themselves when speaking, and members should note that there are a couple of supplementary agenda items as part of the pack, which were published over recent days following the publication of the substantive report. The first relates to minutes of the last meeting of Cabinet on the 5th of September. Then there is a supplementary pack relating to the agenda item on special educational needs and disabilities. And furthermore, this morning, we also had a statement that we've circulated to members of Cabinet and the executive and officers, and this is from the chair of the Education, Children, Young People and Lifelong Learning Scrutiny Commission, Councillor Elizabeth Booker, on behalf of the Commission. And there's a statement that people can read and a resolution, which I will come to at the appropriate juncture during the course of this meeting. The meeting is anticipated to run until midday. It's got quite a packed agenda, so we will be moving swiftly on. But before we do, just wanted to formally welcome Abby Vargo to her first Cabinet meeting here at Newham Council in her role as the Chief Executive. And I hope you enjoyed things, and also my thanks in advance to the hard work efforts of officer clerks to the committee, Joy George in particular, because I know it's not an easy gig. Right, so I'm going to first receive formal apologies that Joy George has been noting. So if you could kindly advise, Joy.
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Montez Khan and from Councillor Anne Easter.
Okay, and just to advise, Councillor Armour-Verdi will need to step out at 11 o'clock. Councillor Neil Wilson is joining us, but will be joining us later. Councillor Joshua Garfield will be joining us shortly. And I'm anticipating Councillor James Asser to be in attendance. And there are also apologies from Councillor Carly Parkway.
Chair, I will need to leave 11:15 if that's okay.
Okay, fine. And then we've also got Councillor Zulfikar Ali, who is needing to depart at 11:15 as well. Okay, I am now going to be moving on to declarations of interest in light of the matters that we're going to be considering today. Can I just invite members of Cabinet and the wider executive to advise if there are any disposable pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests that they may have on any of the matters that we're going to be discussing this morning? Ready?
No.
No, all round, including me. And then if we can just move to the minutes of the Cabinet meeting on the 5th of September 2023, and that's in one of the supplementary agenda items. Can we just note the minutes, and can I just resolve that these are an accurate and true record of the decisions that we made on the 5th of September.
Great.
Agreed, that's agreed. Brilliant. Then moving on to appointments to outside bodies. No appointments to outside bodies. So we're now going to be swiftly moving on to big important item 5, overall financial position, Q2 budget monitoring report, which denotes month 5 of this current municipal year. And I'm going to be inviting Councillor Zulfikar Ali to make some introductory remarks, and perhaps you could kindly draw attention to some key points in the report. And then I will be inviting Conrad Hall, who is our Corporate Director of Resources, and as required, Andrew Ward, if he's here, to talk through any elements as it pertains to the debate and the decision-making process. Then I will open up to questions, and subject to answers to that, we will be proceeding to the vote. Okay, right, over to you, Zulfikar.
Thank you, Chair, and Councillor Zulfikar Ali, Cabinet Lead for Finance and Resources. Colleague, as you will recall, we presented a Q1 report on financial position in July, and we are continually monitoring the situation on a regular basis. And this report gives you Council's financial position at Q2, month 5, ending at the August of 2023. Unfortunately, the position has changed, and an overspend of 14.2 million is now forecast against general fund budget of 363 million. And this represents an adverse variance of 6 million from the month 2 position. We are facing an important and a serious situation which requires further action in order to reduce the current forecast overspend so that we present a balanced budget at the end of the current financial year. Whilst this is worrying, I just like to put things in the context. I don't think it comes any of us as a surprise. The financial perspective, we all know that local authorities all over the United Kingdom are going through very tough and challenging times. And unfortunately, in Newham's case, we are not exempt from any of those pressures. Just to put this in the context, so yeah, we are seeing this as a perfect storm, has been a result of the disastrous 13 years of Tory rule. We've seen failure of this government, this country, and they forced our people deeper into poverty. Public sectors is on their knees, and its waiting lists are at the highest record level. More than 90% of crimes are going unresolved, schools are crumbling, and local government has been cut to the bone and beef. 2/3 of our funding comes from central government, and adult and social care and children represent 70%. Just giving you some context, LGA, Local Government Association, estimates the local government sector needs £3 billion to stand still where we are. We've seen the business rates haven't been reviewed since 2013, and they're no longer fit for purpose. The core funding formula hasn't been updated since 2013. It does not reflect the local needs. The Institute of Fiscal Studies have recently published some very, very serious figures, and they show that last 13 years, councils have forced a reduction of 18% in funding. If you put this in context, this is twice more than the leafy surveys, but also 18% in new contracts represents £65 million. Had we had 65 million, we would be in a far better position to invest money into services that our local people need. We have rising demand in social care. Highest inflation is squeezing us all. And the councils of all types are being pushed beyond breaking point. And this means that there are more and more difficult decisions that we all have to make. Over 90% of the boroughs are forecasting an overspend this year. And the estimate is exceeding 400 million across general fund and the HRA. Just to put into context, this equates to 140 million in adult social care, 90 million in children, 80 million in homelessness, between 500 to 600 savings next year will be required as part of 2.2 billion over the next 4 years. And the accumulated deficit of dedicated school grant, is also around 300 million. There are huge pressures on HRA. They're driven by the 7% social rent cap, the fire safety costs, damp and mold costs. So we do have serious issues. But in terms of where we are, 14.2 million is where the current forecast sits. But there is some good news. We are forecasting break-even position on the HRA. Our dedicated school grant, again, we are projecting break-even position, but pressure is there on in and out of borough high-cost placements. And we also plan for a 3 million deficit reduction. The capital program is forecast to underspend by 69 million out of 539, and the council tax is on target. However, as the report indicates, we have 14.2 million forecast overspend at Q2 level. And this is primarily in 3 main areas. Social care, health, adult social care, 3.4 million. This mainly relates to uplift in service delivery costs, around 10% for in-borough and out-of-borough care, and as well as increase in service demand due to population increase. Young people services, 3.6 million. Again, this reflects the increase in cost of looked after children due to high cost placements, and also dealing with complex needs and support, as well as a critical incident which required significant safety planning and support. The third most important area is the homelessness, which is a national crisis. Our forecast overspend is 4.6 million. And this represents an adverse position of 2.7 million from the Q1 position. And we have continually rising demands in homeless. We've seen 17% increase so far. We're forecasting approximately 30 cases coming through our doors every month. We have 35,000 people on the waiting list, around 5,000 people in temporary accommodation, and that is highest in London. But we're not sitting still. We're addressing these issues. Had we not dealt with temporary accommodation costs swift enough, our costs could have been well over 20 million. To address this, we have taken a number of actions swiftly in order to deliver cost avoidance and savings. And our focus has been on prevention of homelessness, improving standards of accommodation, accelerating our acquisition program. Over 260 properties have already been purchased, which are contributing to cost reduction. The cabinet at its September meeting agreed to further initiatives. One is to buy back the buyback acquisitions, and the other is to buy back properties from landlords where tenants have been served notice as long as tenants qualify for homeless. And we're improving our empty properties in regeneration areas like Canning Town and Custom House so that we can use them as a meanwhile use for TA purposes. We cannot sustain the situation we are in. We need to do everything we can to reduce this, and we are doing it. We must deliver a balanced budget and continue to deliver our corporate priorities and manifesto commitment. It won't be easy, but I can say that our new chief executive, our senior management team, our finance team, our executives and cabinet, and the mayor are all working together to bring about remedial action, which, as the report states, will be reported back to the next meeting. We are not alone in this. We are with the rest of local government. This is an unprecedented time for us all. Despite the challenges, NEWM continues to serve the needs of people. And we want to continue to deliver our ambition work plan in delivering, improving our services, our residents as they deserve the best. I would like to reassure our residents that we will continue to deliver those, and our plans will continue, but we'll find ways and means to ensure continue to be the government get a fair deal for our residents. Thank you, Chair. I'll invite Conrad Hall if you wish to add it.
Okay, Conrad.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Conrad Hall. I'm Council's Corporate Director of Resources and Statutory Chief Finance Officer. Councillor Ali has given a very comprehensive introduction to the report, so I won't speak for long. important size. It is not possible, I don't think, to understate the seriousness of the position. As Councillor Ali has set out, the context is really important. If I could just highlight one figure that Councillor Ali gave you, the data suggests that aggregate overspend across London is some £400 million. You divide that by 32 London boroughs, and you see the condition for Newham, whilst extremely serious, is entirely in line with the sort of averages we are seeing across London. I think, and I'm in no way making a political statement here, it is reasonable to ascribe much of this to national policy. A housing crisis, we're all well aware of, funding for social care in particular, in no way over. There are many other issues as well the sector would raise about local authority. None of that context changes the fact that whilst we may think that the bulk of this position in no small measure lies elsewhere, is our problem to solve. Cannot afford a £14 million overspend, and therefore, as Councillor Ali has set out, significant and urgent action underway to ramp up the existing plans in order to drive that overspend down, and that will be reported in detail to the next cabinet meeting, take place on Thursday, the 9th of November. Given the scale of the challenge, whilst we will of course continue to look for every efficiency and back office saving, it is difficult to imagine that it will be possible to tackle an overspend of that size without also needing to confront challenging decisions at level of service provision. And we will do that in the usual transparent way in which Newham approaches budgets. Councils up and down the land are facing similar dilemmas to ensure that we get that role and indeed confront equally and likely more challenging decisions about next year's budget, as I say, in a fully transparent way in which Newham approaches its budget. I should also thank myself and the Warden Deputy. Happy to take questions on detail in the report.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, are there any questions that anyone would like to ask?
Not a question, a statement, or you don't want a statement. Yeah.
No, because
No.
it's just questions on the back of what we've heard and anything in the report.
See whether I can make this into a question. Somebody else here.
I've got a question. In terms of the mitigation actions set out with reference to a report two, could you just elaborate and provide detail on the mitigations around temporary accommodation? I know that we've got a temporary accommodation paper coming, but also of pressures on social care and children's services. If you could advise on what is driving latter, and outside of the interventions being made with regards to possibly nighttime accommodation, pressures on the revenue account, given the scale of people presenting, what government doing?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. That's quite a big question. Other colleagues in the room, cabinet leads and directors who may well want to come in. Good point. But let me start with a sort of general response, and then as appropriate, others can pick in. So if we start with temporary accommodation, it is the case that Newham's numbers in temporary accommodation are the highest in London, certainly the highest in the country, I'm fairly sure. But but the housing crisis is affecting councils, particularly in London and the South East too. Kinds of interventions we are undertaking on the supply side, if you like. We have a substantial acquisition program, which is the fastest way to obtain new stock, and also a substantial building program, because buying more stock doesn't solve the underlying problem. There is just not enough housing to go around. Now, those are all substantial financial transactions, and indeed, the next report on this agenda highlights the significant borrowing that the council will be undertaking to finance those programs. Financially, they work. If you look at it from Newham's point of view, when we purchase new accommodation, we're able to take people out of the most expensive form of temporary accommodation, and provide them with better, secure housing. So, there is a financial saving, a significant social saving. You just have to sort of look at the scale of the numbers. We have over 6,000 people, I think, places figure in temporary accommodation. Cannot, as we obviously provide in any sort of time frame that would work in policy terms, housing on that scale. Prices in and around Newham, you would be looking at an investment of £3 billion, even assuming the stock was available, which is so we are also looking at extending significantly the geographic areas in which we will place families whilst still retaining reasonable public transport distances to and there is a good and financially sensible policy intervention. I think it's really important to emphasise, large organisations, we cannot fight our housing crisis. We can't on our own meet the housing market if I put it that way. So further intervention from government, I think, is essential. Two obvious policy asks to be dealt with very quickly by government would be to upgrade the local housing allowance, which would therefore provide people with more benefit. It's just keeping up with inflation, not necessarily some increase, and therefore reduce the number of people presenting as currently, for inflation, we started the year estimating we would deal with some 30 homeless. Latest data shows that was increasing. We can't understate the scale of the financial challenge this gives us, and of course, the scale of the social challenge that presents for those families in desperate need. Second, again, straightforward policy intervention available to government is to financially recognise the scale of this crisis and increase the various grants that are available to local authorities to cover the costs of it. That doesn't deal with the underlying social problem, which is lack of supply and so on, but at least the really, really significant burden falling on local authorities and falling districts on them. There are many other interventions government could make, around, for example, helping councils with their building programmes in order to ensure that those remain financially viable in today's challenging economic circumstances. Those, of course, necessarily are long term, but nonetheless important, because otherwise all we are doing, along with other local authorities, is buying more stock and sort of, actually driving house prices even higher. So it needs a national policy. Going to social care, I think it is widely accepted in the sector that funding for local government around and social care in particular, as Councillor Ali highlighted, many years out of date and no longer reflect need. Like other local authorities, is seeing demand for rise. I suspect we're still seeing a strong, long-lasting effect of the COVID pandemic on the adult social care side. More people needing care from the council and needing higher levels of care, as well as the very significant. I'm going to pause there now. I mean, many other colleagues in the room with more sector-specific expertise on that who could add points. We just have to emphasise, in the short term, parts of this government can fix with sort of grants to recognise the scale of the challenge. I think there are wider policy interventions available to government, that would tackle this over the long term. But at the moment, the real challenge, funding, not keeping pace with need and confidence that local authorities up and down the country are finding is that they simply cannot continue to provide services, many of which are defined in statutes. There's a real sort of mismatch between the need to stay affordable and the need in legislation to provide services. And that needs to be tackled at a national policy level.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to, before I take any questions, just given the questions around children's services health, I know that we don't have a cabinet member for health here as yet, but I'm going to go to relevant officers. But on children's services, did you want to comment just in terms of any of the budget related pressures as it pertains to forecasts? Otherwise, I'm going to go to the interim corporate director.
I think I would like to comment because I think that both Councillor Ali and Conrad have highlighted that we are, Conrad may not have said we're in a perfect storm, but actually we are. In children's services, we have pressures throughout the year, and what doesn't help is the fact that our placements is not necessarily in our control, although I think that the department have undergone a huge piece of work in actually trying to bring those costs down. But just a couple of things. We don't get the full amount of money per young person for our unaccompanied asylum seekers. We get, I think, something like 290 something, and it actually costs us 600 and odd. So there is a disparity, and the government need to recognise that. They are we have a quota that we have to take. The government insists we have up to our quota, and we do, unlike boroughs outside of London who choose not to. But also, and my question actually is around, we're often asked about whether the asylum seekers and refugees that are placed in our borough have a knock-on effect on our temporary accommodation. And they don't. We have no control whatsoever at the number of refugees and asylum seekers that are placed in this borough in hotels and other probably unsuitable venues. But it does have a knock-on effect on all of our services. So it affects, certainly Neil would be saying, if he was here, it has a knock-on effect on our adult health services, on our children's services, in education, in our social care, and it has that effect on the borough that a lot of people think, oh, they're taking our housing. So I think where we would like to, my question is, what pressure can we put on the government to, we can't stop them placing refugees and asylum seekers in our borough, and probably neither would we, but they do need to recognise that there is a cost to the local authority on placing people in our borough, and I don't think we get any money whatsoever for that. And I just wondered what pressure the local authority can put on government to make life easier for us.
So, Mayor, if it's all right, do you want me to answer? And then again, colleagues may want to. I think there are two or three principal points to make. To begin with, it's important to emphasise, as we've stressed, human circumstances, I know are local differences, clearly, but the fundamental factors affecting this are ones affecting the entire local authority sector. And the representative agencies like local association, councils make very strong representation on these points, and we echo those, and to agree our voices heard as part of that collective lobbying effort. We also engage with senior time to time when we can get ministers to emphasise particular points around Newham, for example, scale of the housing crisis, but I know recently emphasised in considerable detail to officials at the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities about the scale of the challenge we face. I think that the sort of wider point in all of this is it's well-established policy, pretty self-evident really. Government, like any government, including, I'm not going to make a political statement, but any government is entitled to set policies that it wishes to follow, and then expect other parts of the state, local authorities, or whatever to consequences of those. But it doesn't make sense to set policy, if you like, at sort of one level and funding at another level. It seems to me that it's an obvious reasonable expectation of any government, of any political government, but when it changes policy in any respect, there's an established doctrine called the New Burdens Funding Doctrine that deals with this, that they should then match the resources made available to the local authority sector to deal with that. I fear that in recent years we've seen quite a disparity between the impact of policy and funding, and until that is rectified, like for councils, we will find ourselves in these exceptionally challenging circumstances. And I think that is why the context is so important. I emphasise again and again and again, although we will of course be making the case to government, this remains our problem to deal with, and deal with it, we will have to do so regardless of how challenging consequences that may be. We can't just sort of avoid the problem, even if we think the fault lies elsewhere. But the challenges we face, are different only in bits of degree to those of other local authorities around the country. We've seen half a dozen local authorities declare support situations. One sees in the press every week now other councils, they may be close to it. All local authorities are feeling this private capitalism and consequences of managing it as we must and getting back within our budget. I feel will have significant consequences for certain.
Thank you very much. I'm going to just invite Corporate Director for Children's Services for any commentary, and also the Corporate Director for Health and Adult Social Care.
In terms of too much to what's already been said, areas of pressure in terms of the budget, there have been positive movements in terms of mitigation achieved through reviewing children's care plans and meeting those needs in other ways, but that has been countered somewhat by challenging inflation and market and the challenging position in the market generally. I think it's sort of notes in the school transport budget. Again, rising pressure, rising demand, education, health and care plans, but also rising inflation affecting prices. So some areas where, despite the positive mitigation, about £2.9 million of mitigations, which involve typically also experience. I think it's been out in the report. Number of areas in both social care and CMP.
Okay, thank you very much. Colin?
Yeah, just won't add too much more to what's already been said, thank you. Yeah, I think we financial regulatory structures are well known, well documented. The cost of services was given councils which are very similar joints and so just to sort of put that a little bit into context, you know, some of the components that we do about residential placements, then that was education. That's it. So it's a combination of both inflationary pressures, but also a system that has been funded for many years. And it's really critical. It's not just being real, but we're feeling that pressure over again. A lot of people that are placed and not placed in them. And we see it in the surrounding areas, but placement costs are continuing to rise. That is the backdrop of more increased complexity of people coming out of hospital that have been discharged from a time in hospital. And it's, you know, people are more complex people and it's fun. I think those are really the underlying features of the plot, not least because a lot of the reforms that we've been talking about for many years in social care continue to be about around the reforms that were now displayed. I think it's a very common factor across the pieces of education. I want to say that the approach is taken out of social care and making sure people stay there home for as long as possible, limiting the amount of time that people go into care homes. All of those things are very pressure things in the right thing to do to mitigate what is currently in the financial forecast. However, there are still issues and pressures that we're having to deal with, and the service will continue to try and drive those costs down.
Thank you very much. No. Okay, any concluding remarks?
Thank you, Chair. I think the situation is as difficult as we have already discussed, but I'm fairly confident that our existing mitigation plans are working reasonably well to the extent that they're being utilized, but we are looking at much more deeper to bring about further remedial actions to the November cabinet, which will help us to restore the confidence in ourselves and also to make sure that we are able to present a balanced budget at the end of this financial year. So thank you indeed for the cabinet and the officers for their due diligence and hard work, and hope that the next report, which we are already working on, is going to deliver some positive outcome to ensure that we are back on the track to achieve the necessary actions to save resource money, make more efficient, and procure more efficiently where needed to make sure that we are back to the budget set was back in February 2023. Chair.
All right, thank you very much. Colleagues, can I just draw your attention to the agenda pack with page number 13 to 16 or number 3 to 6, which just sets out context, explanation, the variance as it pertains to the budget forecast against the general fund. The financial year variance being 6 million, and that's Q2 month 5, which reflects £2 million, and in Q1 the forecast was going to 2 million. And then if you just go to big page number 15 or small page number 5, it just sets out the revenue budget forecast this current financial year, month 5, across the different budget lines and service areas. And then you'll also note that in the summary section on big page number 13, small page number 3, the variance, yeah, there's a bit variance of 6 million as of month 5 from the month 2 position is mainly a result of continued escalation of pressures and temporary accommodation. Those matters report shortly. So now drawing your attention to page number 16 and page number 6. Recommendations 2.1, for the reasons set out in the report and its appendices, Cabinet is asked to 2.1.1 note the report and its appendices detailing the forecast of 5 overspend, 14.2 million against the general fund budget of 3.6 million. 2.1.2 note continued implementation of across the council. 2.1.3 note that a part 2 report will be presented to Cabinet in November 2023, setting out additional budget actions that the council will undertake to recover the financial position. Is that all noted? That's very much. We're now going to be moving on to an equally important paper, and this is item 6, financing the capital programme, across pages 75 to 100 in the agenda pack. So similarly, I'm going to be inviting Councillor Zulfikar Ali to do an introduction, then I'll invite officers as appropriate, and then we'll open up to any specific questions as it pertains to the report, and then we'll go to considering the recommendations. Over to you, Zulfikar.
Thank you, Chair. And as per the earlier discussion, that this report refers to the capital programme, and this is to seek further authority to borrow in order to continue to deliver our existing capital programme, including 16 additional projects which were agreed as part of the budget 23, 24 and 27th of February. The report also presents the immediate treasury report as set on Appendix 3, and it asks you to note that. The latest additions, as we recall, Chair, include investment in improving accommodation for our vulnerable residents, housing acquisition program to reduce pressure on temporary accommodation, and a state regeneration program, the early hub and other schemes. I would like to say at the outset that our capital program isn't entirely funded through borrowing. We fund these as appropriate, and there's a mixture of sources that we use, and that including grant, income, saving from acquisition, and capital receipts where appropriate. Where borrowing is required, we act responsibly. We only borrow based on need. And our strategy is to borrow from the Public Works Loan Board. This is a government body from which local authorities gain access relatively cheap long-term financing. Our officers are well aware to ensure the market conditions are noted as part of the borrowing requirement, and we ensure there's a minimum impact on the revenue implication as possible. The evidence of that is that you may recall that the last report of this nature, we authorized the Director of Finance to borrow £250 million, and we only borrowed 60 million. This was a time limited decision, and that's the reason we're coming back to the Cabinet to seek further authority. But we do make sure that we take advantage and opportunity to secure the borrowing based on need, not simply because the Cabinet has approved, and let's do not hold money in our banks simply because we got the authority, but we borrow only based on need. I would also like to take this opportunity, Chair, to say a few words about the recent media articles about the level of debt across local authorities, where the media used the publication from the Office of Local Government, and this showed that Newham is in 98 out of 300 authorities. I wouldn't say that was too bad, but clearly they tended to focus on this. Our debt level, I would like to say, is not comparable with what the data has been published, and the LGA and other organizations have raised issues with the government with respect to the fundamental flows, which don't actually compare like with like. And some of the examples, if I may say, Chair, are that they're comparing the authorities which have ring-fence HRA with those who don't have own stock. We have PFI liability of £93 million, and this is the amount we still have to pay over the full life cycle of PFI building. and the contract on this were all signed much earlier than 2018. Historically, Newham tend to raise more of their own income from sales and fees and charges, and this isn't captured in the core spending power calculation. Because PFI is likely to be higher in those councils which have education responsibilities and had to build school in early 2000, either due to people growth or crumbling school buildings. I think both these apply to Newham. So the data the government published does not pair like with like. And if I may also add, Chair, that before 2018, Newham did take few decisions to procure some commercial assets. And these were investment properties at a total cost of 92 million, of which the council still owes 86 million. So if we hadn't bought these, our debt would instead be 86 million less, and we would be in a far better position than 98 if that was the case. But we are where we are. And the article that was published in Mirror suggested some councils have increased borrowing to help replace funding shortfalls. That is not the case in Newham. Don't borrow to fund shortfall in revenue. Rather, our borrowing is to invest in in the projects that contribute to local economy, invest in local regeneration projects, such as Carpenter and Canning Down and Custom House. The other measure, by the way, that the government has published is debt servicing as a proportion of core funding power. And this has actually been falling in Newham in this time period. For your information, it was 14.7% in 21-22 financial year, when compared with 15.5% in 2018. Also, Chair, as previously stated in other reports, we have reviewed our capital strategy investment plan, and our strategic approach demonstrates our commitment to our manifesto commitments, our corporate delivery plan, and it also improves our approach to internal controls, governance, and transparency. There are robust checks in place, enabling great openness, transparency for our residents. I must also say at this juncture, the council is required to meet the necessary borrowing requirement of the Prudential Code. And I'm pleased to say that the level of borrowing proposed in recommendation in this report are within the boundaries set by those indicators. I commend the report and the recommendation. I would like to invite Conrad if he would like to add something.
Conrad?
Just one point to highlight, exactly as Councillor Ali said, this is formally enabled to borrow with all consistent with the budget that's already been set. I just really wanted to highlight that the sort of decisions on the timing of that borrowing. The kind of economic forecasts start to fall in 2024 and more so in 2025. Therefore, long-term borrowing and paragraph 370, of the report deals with this. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen. Just the risk is practically that if interest rates rise over time, we may end up paying more for than we enter into long-term. I think it's the right call to needed long-term decisions on interest rates and the current climate. But I did just particularly want to highlight that point, which is inherent in these sort of decisions. Paragraph 360 of the reports that deal with that risk. Otherwise, it's calculated as decisions system. Instead, our obligations and against the code, paying the formal will go on in due course as required on the court. Thank you.
Okay, right. Any questions, colleagues? No, Charlie McLean.
I was quite comprehensive delivery, Councillor Ali. I was just reading in your members' instruction. I just saw a paragraph that about treasury debt, and it said that you're pleased to say that's reduced since 2018, and also said that at the end of financial year 2018, this stood at 915 million, and our actions and good governance reduced this 797 million in 2022. Could you just elaborate just briefly on what it was that you did to do that? It's just because it jumped out at me that's actually quite.
Thank you for that. I think that's helpful. Obviously, you can see reduction. I'll ask Conrad to provide details because.
So I think there were a couple of things going on. I mean, over the period 2018 to around about now, really, we have avoided entering into actually new transactions, which would have increased that amount. We've continued to make least and sometimes more the statutory minimum repayments on outstanding or over the capital element of your mortgage, if you like, contributed to reducing that figure. There's also been one or two occasions where we closed on, for example, where we thought the risk profile of keeping longer suitable. It is important to emphasise, perhaps we'd like to highlight the debt in terms of the actual cash amount has been coming down because of the investment, and we've been discussing it, for example, housing acquisition and regeneration programs. The long-term trajectory of the debt is increasing, and we will see that next years. Those are the sort of actions that have led to that reduction over that period of time.
Okay.
I know you said that it's increasing, but because you mentioned about acquisitions, then obviously that will offset elsewhere, right? Because of the high levels of temporary accommodation. So, well, that will increase. It's a positive.
Between three different sorts of portfolios. So, one level, borrowing is undertaken to invest in the capital asset, generate, if you like, a social return, financial return. So, keeping the moving program, for example, would be a good example of that. You borrow to invest in both infrastructure, the benefit from that, it doesn't. The actual borrowing doesn't make good financial. Secondly, you have borrowing to invest principally in housing and related assets, where you are providing an important service in temporary accommodation, for example, addressing housing supply and so on, and put an awful lot of due diligence into financial models to make these things work. You have every reasonable reason to assume that the income from those assets will cover the cost of servicing the debt and repaying it over time. Nothing certain. Careful. And then the third category is where you invest purely for commercial reasons, and there have been significant changes in legislation on that in recent years, and in any event, the council policy changed significantly in 2018 to avoid further investment in purely commercial assets. And the reason I kind of draw a distinction, I think that a commercial asset works well, will pay for itself, but they are inherently more risky, and you derive no social benefit from it. You may generate a surplus that funds other activities, but when you're investing, for example, in housing, provided it's done in the right way and it pays for itself, you also generate a social benefit. And that's not the case with commercial investment. So that's why I think we have to.
Thank you.
Yeah, any other questions, colleagues? No? Okay, so I'm going to now move on to the recommendations. Page number 79, small page number 5 in my agenda pack, which may not make sense. 2.1, for the reasons set out in the report and its appendices, Cabinet is recommended to agree. 2.1.1, to delegate authority to the Corporate Director of Resources to enter into new long-term borrowing up to £250 million in the period up to the end of July 2024 to fund the estimated requirement for the capital programme in 2023-2024 on the terms as set out in section 4 of this report. 2.1.2 to note that the mid-year treasury set out as Appendix 3 will be presented to the Council at its meeting of 11th of 2023. So if that's agreed, that's agreed, Joy. Thank you very much. We're now going to be moving to paper relating to the new allocations policy. In attendance. And I'm going to be inviting Councillor Shafan Mohammed, Councillor Sabia Kamali to introduce this report. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In February 2022, the Council introduced a new allocations policy. The new allocations policy that we undertook and to come back in with a review in after 12 months. The scheme is aimed to prioritise households on the basis of their housing need. The policy doesn't affect the number of new homes that become available, normally between 600 to 800 per year, but it sets out how the limited supply is allocated. Many of the new allocations have gone to households in the new category for households who are overcrowded and ones that have additional needs, usually medical or base homelessness. We've been also seen a significant increase in the number of households being housed from temporary accommodation. This is a positive outcome given a severe rise in homelessness and the pressures on temporary accommodation supply that we are experiencing. The review indicates that overall the new allocations policy has achieved what we set out to do. Thank you, and I'm just going to introduce a candidate.
Okay, Sabia, were you going to make any comments?
No, I think Councillor Siobhan's covered all of them.
All right, fine. Candida or Darren Levy? All right, fine. Are there any questions? Councillor Neil Wilson.
Councillor Neil Wilson, Cabinet Member for Health and Adult Social Care, and I think apologies have already been given for lateness for another reason. Paragraph 4.2 on page 104 relates to the review processes, and obviously this is as a result of the review that's been undertaken quite widely as outlined in 4.1. But 4.2, just for clarity, the review process improve maintenance of the housing register. We propose to undertake regular reviews of the housing register to remove households who are not bidding and who do not conform, that they wish to remain on the register. And that's obviously good housekeeping. What sort of period are we looking at? We're looking at quarterly or biannually or monthly? Just a sort of idea of scale, Chair.
Okay, right, who's answer?
That's likely to be annually or biannually.
Right, okay,
And sorry, can I have a follow-up?
yeah.
To what extent would that be removing? I mean, are we talking about hundreds or, I mean, because obviously this is a key concern for all elected members, that we have housing as a big issue on our surgeries and correspondence and emails. What sort of numbers are we talking? Yeah.
That would depend on the numbers of response. So essentially what we'd be doing is reviewing the housing register, picking up anybody that hadn't bid for a year or 2 years and contacting them if they still wanted to remain on the housing register in the circumstances, it's still the same. If they said they still wanted to remain on the housing register and the circumstances would remain the same, they'd remain on the register. If for some reason they'd moved on or they no longer wanted to be on the register, it allowed to do the. So it's just a case of making sure that we're regularly updating.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And just picking up on that, it's not an uncommon practice. In fact, it's good practice in order to ensure that on the housing waiting list, we're not just blindly allowing the list to grow without checking and verifying whether or not there's an actual need.
Yeah, it's good housekeeping.
Fine. And I noticed the report, the increase from over the 12 months of moving, transitioning people or households from temporary accommodation to stable housing, in that permanent, stable, secure housing. And the uplift from last year, 228 households, up from 149 the previous year. So, what kind of things, is that the general level that we should be anticipating over the coming 12 months and subsequent months, with an eye to 7,000 households in temporary accommodation that we've got, and the revenue pressures that that's posing?
Certainly that proportion of allocation that's being bid for by people in temporary accommodation will continue. Obviously, part of the mitigations for temporary accommodation is we are ring fencing some properties going forward in the short term, specifically for temporary accommodation. So this will be in addition.
Oh, okay, fine. Any other questions, colleagues? No? Okay, so I'm going to move on to the recommendations set out on my big page number 102. This is set out in the report and its appendices. Cabinet is recommended to promote 2.4 new allocations policy at Appendix 1 and 2.1.3, the proposals for future consultation on amendments to the policy set out in paragraphs 4.4 to 4.7. Is that noted and agreed?
Agreed.
It's agreed. Thank you very much. So now we're going to be moving on to agenda item 8, which is the HRA Housing Revenue Account Residential Portfolio Interim Asset Management Strategy. And that's across big pages, page numbers 123 to 172. Right, over to you, Councillor Shaban Mohammed.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. HRA Residential Portfolio Interim Asset Management Strategy 2023-25 is returning to Cabinet following a formal consultation with residents. We have listened to what the residents want us to prioritise over the next 2 years, and their views have enriched the strategy overall and will deliver improvements required for our people living in our homes. I believe the strategy is crucial to the Council's overall investment strategy and to our approach in meeting future demands on our housing resources. Over the next 2 years, officers will continue to consult stakeholders and gather further stock information, both of which will feed into further developing and refining a 5 and 30-year asset management strategy. I'm confident that this strategy provides a clear framework within our future investment decisions and can be planned and delivered so that our residents can be safe and warm and secure in their homes. Thank you, Chair. And I'm just going to introduce Donna. If there's any questions.
Okay, right. So, Donna Morelli, would you like to say anything? And then I'm going to open up to questions.
No, thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Mohammed has covered all the areas that we want to present in this paper.
Okay. Any questions, please? Okay. I have a question. Just in terms of the number of housing units in our existing councils, which circa some 16,000 units and growing as a consequence of our housing building programme. Through the stock survey that's been undertaken over recent years, how many are we anticipating over the coming 2-year period that will be benefiting from the improvements around energy efficiency and the consequent impact on household budgets?
We would need to come back to you on that rather than.
Okay.
There's a range of initiatives underway at the moment.
Right.
That's something.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. But really good to see this happening. And I look forward to hearing the positive responses from new residents in those council homes. Right.
Chair, can I just thank the officers for all the hard work they've been doing in bringing this paper, and also it's really because we're doing loads of work on our stock as well, so it's a really good piece of work, and I just want to thank Donna and her team for all the hard work they've been doing.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks, Donna. Right, okay, so we're going to be going to the recommendations. Page number 124, for the reasons set out in the report and its appendices, Cabinet is recommended to agree 2.1.1, the HRA Residential Portfolio Interim Asset Management Strategy 2023-2025, Appendix 1, and 2.1.2, delegation to the Director of Housing in consultation with the management, a modernisation to review and make minor amendments to the strategy as may be appropriate to changes to legislation and statutory guidance, case law or legal proceedings. And 2.2 further, Cabinet is asked to note 2.2.1, the consultation report at appendix, setting up the results of the public consultation. Is that all noted and agreed?
Agreed.
That's agreed, Doreen. Now moving on to agenda item 9. This is the approval to secure a main works building contract for Canning Town Old Library, which I'll be doing some introductory remarks about. So colleagues, you'll be aware that the Grade 2 listed Canning Town Library building is a really important heritage feature here in the London Borough of Newham. It was the place, a key figure set up and established what is now known as the National Labour Party of this country. I think it was the Labour Representation Committee that was established. At that event, I won't even attempt to suggest how many years ago, but certainly over 100 years ago. The history is a bit vague from my O levels, how old I am. But it's a really beautiful building. And as part of 2 major programmes that we secured £40 million of government funding for through their Levelling Up agenda. One of the projects in those programmes is the upgrading of the old Canning Town Library. We've done a huge amount of interrogation, investigation of the site, undertaken lots of public consultation, and we are now at a position to procure the main works building contract to transform a beautiful, wonderful heritage asset that's for a very long time into a site where we will be opening up to our residents archives and our heritage pieces, and also ensuring that it's mobilised as part of our Building Newham's creative cultural strategy. I'm going to invite officer colleagues to talk through some of the detail and just make some highlight points. But suffice to say, milestone, it's a demonstration that we are delivering, and even though oftentimes these types of schemes feel quite laborious as well as complex and long-winded, it's right and necessary that we take all the due diligence, engage with local communities, local ward councillors, scope our excellent and exemplary approaches for transforming historic heritage building into a place that will be at the heart of a thriving community in Canning Town. Over to you, Darren. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to add, we've had to increase the investment that the council's putting into this project as a result of the inflationary pressures in the construction market. So as well as the money from central government, there's been an additional council capital allocation, and some of that has came from the UK SPF capital funding that as well. And also to further note that the plans for the ongoing costs of the building are still subject to the National Lottery Heritage Fund bid. Officers are working on submitting that in November time, and we'll know the outcome in February. To confirm that this report is specifically related to the capital works rather than any for the ongoing costs.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open up to questions. Any questions, colleagues? Councillor Sarah Rose.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sarah Rose, Cabinet Member for Children's Services. I just wondered whether officers would like to add anything further to point 6 on page 178 about the actual risk and what our real plan Bs are in case we don't get the National Heritage Lottery funding, because it's all very well us, and I mean I fully support this project, so but actually if we've got a building that we can't actually afford to run, it does make people a little bit nervous.
I'm happy to come back on that, and then maybe I'll bring in Chris for some of the detail. I think the overarching kind of message is we're quite confident that the discussions we're having and the process we're now in with the National Lottery Heritage Fund will yield positive results. You know, they are keen on the project and they're supporting the development of our bid, and it's very much focused on that longer term revenue ask. So we're fairly confident we will get that money. But I'll hand over to Chris, who can maybe speak about some of the other options if we can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so in the report there should be detail there, and if it's not there to be added, but I think it is in place, that states that the option B is for an expert third-party provider of cultural services to come in and provide that service within the building. We would ensure that that provider was based within the community and had good knowledge of it, but it would need obviously to be subject to a competitive process. As Darren rightly says, that is the fallback position, and we remain confident that we will obtain the money from National Heritage Lottery funding. They have helped us in facilitating and planning for the bid, and that is obviously our primary course of action. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much. Right, any other questions, colleagues? No. Right, so just moving on to the reason set services, the Mayor and Cabinet are recommended to 2.1.1 approve the commencement of the main building works procurement process for Canning Town Old Library refurbishment, estimated contract value of £6.9 million. 2.1.2 delegate authority for the Director of Inclusive Economy and Housing in consultation with new member for Inclusive Economy, Housing Delivery, Climate Emergency, Performance and Transformation to award and enter in a main works with the highest contractor following a procurement process for the main building works. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
That's agreed. Thank you very much. Now we're going to be moving on to another major and significant structure programme. Colleagues, this is the Stratford Station Capital Improvements Enablement paper, item 10. So over the past 2 years, you will have been appraised, as will have all members of the council, about a really important strategic collaboration that Newham Council is part of, alongside Network Rail, Transport for London and the London Legacy Development Corporation. It pertains to the much needed, much required improvements and expansion to the Stratford station, which, as many of you know, is heavily congested, particularly at peak times, and is amongst most scooter hubs anywhere in the UK. It has a designation and profile in the Mayor of London Transport Strategy, major transport hub for London, and is crucial in enabling the growth of Newham. That's the inclusive economic growth of Newham and London and the South East region. This programme that we've embarked on with our partners is nationally significant. It will command a huge amount of capital money for a major transport infrastructure scheme that we will be bidding to national government, both Department of Transport and HM Treasury. We presented to government the outline business case for Stratford Station in August, and we have mobilised a range of important partners from across the South East in support of our programme and project. This paper sets out a rationale and reason as to why we will be wanting to contribute £1 million, which will be match funded by the Network Rail and Transport for London, alongside £1.3 million from the London Legacy Development Corporation. The cumulative amount will help enable the progress into the next phase of developing the outline business case, so that by 2025 we are ready to submit the most diligent, robust, evidence-based bid to national government, because Stratford needs the scale of investment, which simply put, as an agency, Network Rail, Transport for London, as agencies, separate agencies, Network Rail, Transport for London, LLDC and Newham Council can't do it alone. The beauty of this scheme is that the vast majority of the land in and around Stratford is public owned, and this is testament to the significant placemaking and transformation that can happen when public come together as partners over private investment driving development of our places and our neighbourhoods, and then in the region of 20 to 40% profit for their profit margins and investor returns. The details in the paper, happy to answer any questions, but I trust that that provides you a good overview. But suffice to say, before I pass it over to Officer Clerk, then I'll pass it to Darren Mackin. The rest of the crucial need for Stratford Station expansion. It is at the seams, and it presents a real public health safety risk for commuters coming through Stratford, but more importantly, our residents, and also to advise the Stratford Station plans around its expansion, and the sort of design approach will very much be done in collaboration with Newham Council at the top table, ensuring that our neighbourhood, that's Stratford, is shaped in the way that suits our communities and is aligned to our strategic objectives as set out in the Building a Fairer Newham corporate plan, and in line with our inclusive growth, climate emergency and Stratford vision proposals. I'll pause there and hand it over to Darren Mackin.
I don't think I've got anything to add, Mayor. Chair, I think your introduction was comprehensive.
Thank you very much.
Gold star down.
Any questions? Councillor Joshua Barker.
Thank you, Chair. I think the paper and the vision for Stratford Station is a really ambitious one, and I commend it, having lived in the area the vast majority of my life, and obviously proud to represent it as a councillor. I wanted to inquire, or at least to see if we can illustrate a bit more detail for people that might be watching off the minutes of the meeting about the level of public consultation and engagement that will be taking place between now and any stage of construction, following, of course, a commitment from the Treasury and from the DFT as to what we can have funded. I understand that there is an ambition to build homes and offices on top of the railway tracks, the Jubilee line and DLR, in order to generate sufficient revenue to fund a vast portion of the scheme, which I think is a wonderful idea and of course creates a seamless barrier, I suppose, between what will be New Carpenter's Estate and Stratford Station with the two new entrances. And I think that the people who currently live in the area and who perhaps envision moving to the area, given the vast improvements that have taken place over the past 2 decades, would love to be as involved as possible to ensure that there is a really mixed and vibrant community that frankly makes Stratford how brilliant it is. It'd be really great to hear a bit more detail about that if possible.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to draw your attention to big page number 189 in the report, section 4.1, going through to 4.7, which just provides the detail of what the aggregate money will be used for, and there is across all stages into public engagement and consultation as there has been to date. I'll pass over to Darren. Perhaps you'd like to elaborate just around the master planning and the approaches we generally take across all of our schemes and how we will influence ensuring that that happens in the similar fashion that we elevate here in Newham.
Yeah, of course, thank you. So the initial business case, which the mayor mentioned already been submitted, there was a range of public consultation around 12 months ago, leading up to Christmas last year. It's fairly extensive in Wentfield and in the Stratford Centre, in and around the area. And we did that jointly with the LLDC and TfL. So that joint approach has already started to more months going forward. As the business case develops, so we're in a period now of kind of background work, looking at the kind of financial modelling, working up some more of those proposals so that we can come back out to the community with something further to discuss. And that will be phased across the development in the next 2 years. So there'll be continued engagement, and I think I'll continue kind of ask and iterate kind of process, make sure that the residents
Yes.
Fantastic.
It's a really, really exciting piece. Right, okay, I'm gonna move on to the recommendations on big page number 187. So for the reasons set out in this report, Cabinet is recommended to approve the allocation of £1 million to London Legacy Development Corporation to match the of an updated business redevelopment of Stratford Station. Delegates authority to the Corporate Director of Inclusive Economy and Housing in consultation with the lead member for Inclusive Economy, Housing Delivery and Climate Emergency Performance and Transformation to agree the terms and conditions of any relevant agreements between all parties, including cash flow of the Council's funding contribution to the development of the business case to the London Legacy Development Corporation, and endorse the Council's continued involvement in this project. Is this agreed?
Can I just make a point here?
Yeah.
This is the recommendation 2.1, allocation of 1 million. Perhaps we ought to clarify 1 million from the council's capital program because it doesn't say.
Yeah, okay, good point. So it's not coming from the general fund, i.e. revenue, it's coming from capital. So if we can just insert.
Just to be clear, the budget that's being used for this is a revenue budget that is designated to fund feasibility projects like this. We're not ultimately acquiring a capital asset, which is a bit kind of accounting test. We're not going to own Stratford Station for that. Obviously, it is a capital asset of very significant importance for the borough.
So just in response to the question raised by Councillor Zulfikar Ali, what's the best? Leave as it is, or
the recommendation is technically correct.
The only reason I raised this here is that in 1.1, it says the report seeks approval for the provision of 1 million from the capital expenditure program. That's the reason I raised it.
But the funding source for that capital is a budget. I mean, this is just a sort of a so. The distinction is that capital expenditure can be funded either from capital sources, borrowing, capital receipts, or whatever, or revenue. But the same is not true in reverse. You can't fund revenue expenditure from capital.
Okay, so. Sulphur,
Well, if revenue stream is funding capital, then that's perfectly fine, but it wasn't clear. That's why I raised it.
okay, so can we just, for the purposes of the minutes, Conrad, are you able to just provide a form of words and capture purposes of the minutes in order to clarify the distinction as you've previously set out?
For the purpose of the minutes, then yes. So we'll check the wording of this, but the funding source for the proposal is an existing national revenue budget, which is used to contribute towards the capital programme in which this is. That I think the discussion has made the point there. We can put it on the that wording pointing review of the minutes, but I hope that's sufficiently clear.
And if we attach it as an MB to 1.1 in the minutes? Yeah. You happy with that?
Thank you.
All right, great. So just going back to the recommendations and again, just inviting Cabinet only. Do you agree?
Great, Chair.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, moving on to agenda item 11. So this is the Marshgate Lane Greenway Links programme.
Thank you. So this is about beginning improvements around the Marshgate Lane and links to the Greenway. It's part of the Olympic Park that hasn't had as much investment as some other bits and is subject to an area of development. There are 2,500 homes coming in that area. People may know it because it is close to Pudding Mill Lane Station, is now being quite heavily used because the ABBA venue is there. So the amount of footfall has picked up. It is an area which is in need of investment. It's not the nicest of walking routes and is in needs a number of improvements, including road crossings, but just general improvement in terms of the and the brightening up. It's not particularly safe for cyclists, and we know there's been a hotspot for antisocial behaviour and problems with vehicles mounting and parking on the pavement too. So this is a programme that will kind of begin to improve that with a combination of new zebra crossings, work to stop cars driving on the pavement, new lighting, better access ramps to the Greenway. This is being done in conjunction with LLDC, who are providing a total funding of 2 million with match funding from us of 500,000 from the active and sustainable travel capital programme. So this will be another part of that bit of Stratford that will be being improved, better access, and certainly look a lot better for both visitors to the area, which we now, as I say, have a large footfall in that particular spot because of the new venue, but also for the new residents moving in, and will just add to the growing sense of improvements we're making, particularly it links into the Greenway, which, as we know, is now very heavily used by residents, both as a kind of commuter and travelling route, but also a leisure route. So hopefully that adds everything. I'm not sure if any officers wish to add anything at that point.
Yeah, just sorry, I'm just to add it's been identified for ASB particularly affecting and the lighting and the speed of actually releasing.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions, colleagues? No? Right, so I'm just noting the recommendations on big page number 235, which runs from 2.1 all the way through to 2.1.6.6. And I'm going to invite members of Cabinet to agree the recommendations as set out in the paper. Do we agree?
Agreed.
Agreed.
That's it. Now moving on to agenda item 12. You've been with my bet today. Bit with my bet today. The procurement of paperless permits for parking services.
They'll soon stop that.
Right, okay. This again is highways. I'm going to be inviting Councillor James Asser to introduce this report.
Thank you. This is one of those joyous technical reports that has to come to Cabinet because this is pre-procurement paper that we obviously bring before we get into the procurement process. The paperless permit contract with My Permit, which has been running for several years, is coming to the end of its contract. We therefore need to go out for a new procurement process. Beginning of that, I think people are used to this process of a pre-procurement before we get to procurement. One of the things obviously we'll do is look at what has been changed during the period of the last few years and what additional measures we might need in a new contract, and that'll be covered in this. But this is the beginning of that process to make sure that we have a contract in place to run the parking permit system and the on-street parking. Is hugely important to make sure the system works effectively both for residents and visitors and businesses. Don't know if anyone from the parking team wishes to add anything. They are sat quietly and pensively at the back.
Mind if I just read one point, is that there's only all the online, there's only 1.37% of everybody who uses assistance by email, by phone. So it is going down, so that's pretty good. As part of the procurement, we're looking at improving the so we can get that 1.37 down. So it's pretty much they get an application on time for a phone call if they are struggling to the line code. So that will be part of the procurement and scoring of any tenders.
Thank you very much. Any questions, colleagues? I've got Councillor Stevens.
I'm one of those 1%, Alan. And without the absolute super response from Rabina, I would be having a parking ticket every day. So we really do need to ensure that that system is less clunky. And also the lack of My Permit actually responding and answering the phone. You know, those things are really important. And I'm not the only one in the room who gets a response from My Permit on the phone. You know, it is taking a long time. So I think having no permits is great, and I use the system a lot, but we have to make it work and be less clunky.
So we'll obviously pick up all feedback we've had over the period to make sure that any issues that have come up or kind of learning experiences are picked up as part of the procurement, so that it'll be a tendering process. But
yeah,
you know, we address that in the new.
Yeah. Right, I can't see any more hands up, so I'm going to just draw everyone's attention to the recommendations. Page number 0 in my pack. For the reasons set out in the report, Cabinet has recommended to agree 2.1.1, the procurement for the supply of paperless permits, parking using the Eastern Shires Procurement Organisation, otherwise known as ESPO framework. 2.1.2, delegate authority to the Corporate Director of Environment and Sustainable Transport in consultation with the lead member of Environment, Highways, Sustainable Transport, and Sustainable Transport to award and enter into the contract following the relevant procurement exercise. Do we all agree?
Agreed, Chair.
Great.
Thank you very much. We've all agreed. Colleagues, we have three substantive items left. I'm proposing that we proceed unless people are very keen for a no more than 15-minute comfort break.
That would be lovely.
Okay, so I'm going to propose, having noted, that would be lovely.
Should we say 10 minutes?
10 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Meeting.
10:46.
Right.
Okay.
Grab Rabina before she disappears.
Yes.
Probably that. Right.
Could grab her, unfortunately, sat dutifully next door doing her emails.
Oh, is that where you are?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I think.
Okay, I'm going to go and. You know what, I was kind of.
Which one?
1901 or 1902,
Yes,
because,
1900.
right,
But in fact, but what you're thinking about is the precursor of G&B
No.
Yeah, Horsley. Yeah, and in Thorn, and it was a late.
Yeah, I think, you know what?
Yeah, because I did, basically A level history,
What I might do.
basic fucking movements from.
Umar,
I was fine. And
I think it's a good idea. That we I did the same.
Did you? You know, honestly, I lost it a bit. The tie-in with. Gonna take it.
Well, she's gonna do it.
No, I wanted to go and get.
Oh,
and I.
It said Helen, so.
Yeah.
Find it.
Be careful. and-
Yeah. Well,
An updated one.
but enough of the Helen. Why I'm going to the local forest.
Deal with it in a short while.
I got it. You're a master. Maybe I should have texted.
Now.
which is the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Spend and Inclusion Strategy 2023 to 2028. Prior to me handing it over to Councillor Joshua Garfield, who's the lead member for education and the interim director of children and young people services, I'm just going to note for the purposes of minutes, during the course of this morning, we've received 2 statement positions, or 1 statement position with regards to the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Send and Inclusion Strategy from the chair of the Education, Children, Young People and Lifelong Learning Scrutiny Commission, Councillor Elizabeth Booker, alongside a document titled Resolutions relating to education vision, services for children with special educational needs and disabilities, and mental health single point of access update in light of their pretty late dispatch and to Councillor Joshua. Just want to formally note that we've received them, and I'll be asking Councillor Joshua Garfield alongside the interim corporate director to engage with the scrutiny chair concerned by the normal executive scrutiny processes and in line with the protocol onto these. And I'll be inviting Councillor Joshua Garfield to provide an update at the next meeting of Cabinet to take place in November. And all of these matters can be dealt with outside and we'll receive in due course. So that's just for noting for the minutes. And on that point, I will pass over to Councillor Joshua Garfield.
Thank you, Chair. And, good morning, everyone. We were really proud to bring draft Send and Inclusion Strategy to Cabinet in June. And you will all recall, colleagues, that we then went out for statutory public consultation, which have been required through legal advice. Following that period of consultation, we're now bringing the finalised strategy to you. There's a few things I want to highlight before handing over to Vic, who can provide some underlining detail, and then we'll move on to questions. But ultimately, you all know that Newham's SEND services have been on an improvement journey ever since the joint area inspection of 2021. One of the things that we were required to do in our written statement of action is to update our SEND strategy and incorporating 4 areas of improvement that were identified by the Joint Area Inspectorate. This strategy has been co-produced by over 300 stakeholders with almost 1,000 different touch points and consultees on the strategy over the past 18 months. The SEND Commission that commenced in May 2021, where considerable consultation was led and chaired by Professor Jeff Lindsay, engaged over 125 stakeholders at that time, and that resulted in the SEND Commission report of July 2022. We've got a piece of work before us that has gone through several years in this borough since the inspection in 2021 of partnership work, health, our schools and education settings, and primarily with our families with children with SEND and children and young people who are the most impacted by our SEND services, a statutory service that we have to offer and that we know we have to continue to improve. Because it is incumbent upon us to make sure, as we've committed to in the manifesto, that Newham is the best place in the country for every single child and young person to grow up. And that, of course, includes children and young people with SEND. So this document, currently as it stands, has got sign-off from the Partnership with Health. It's a co-designed partnership strategy and has been signed off by the Parent Carer Forum. This is a local area partnership strategy. It's not something that just relies on the local authority to deliver, but it does rely on the local authority to lead and to give voice. And through that consultation and through that engagement, we have devised 5 priorities listed in the strategy, I'm not going to list them all for you because I want more time for questions, but I'll talk to you a little bit about the first priority, and that is strengthening early identification and early intervention pathways. We all know that the earlier that needs are identified in children and young people, the earlier the intervention is provided and the support services are there for that young person and for that family, the better off that child is, and the less support they need later in life, and the more able they are to thrive in any kind of school setting in the borough, including perhaps some of the specialist places that we are providing as a result of the outcome of the inspection. That is why it's our focus and why our partnership with health focused on resourcing that early intervention. When we presented the strategy to scrutiny last week, and we have been engaging with them to ensure that their input is received and valued, they raised questions on the level of consultation and the difference between the co-production through the stakeholder workshops that included, as I mentioned, parent carers, professionals, school leaders, governors, members, etc., and the public statutory consultation, and wanted to understand the difference between them. That is why that we prepared in detail the addendum that was circulated towards the end of last week, which delves into who we consulted, when we did so, and what the different form of workshops look like, including how we consulted children and young people with SEND. We've gone right across the board here to ensure that we've got full buy-in from the entire education and health community, because without them, the strategy doesn't succeed. The last thing I'll say, what this strategy doesn't do is allocate resources, because that isn't the job or the role of a SEND inclusion strategy. What it does is it outlines the priorities for our children and young people with SEND, for our families that rely on the service, and it outlines to them what they should expect from their local authority, what they should expect from their child's school, from the health services in our borough, and what it is they can hold us to account on. That is really fundamental. And we're going to be making sure that this strategy is, if passed today, printed and circulated to every single school and educational setting in the borough, is displayed publicly in our libraries, and is available online in accessible formats, various accessible formats for all the families that we serve in this borough. Because this will be the document that we will be referring to for the next 5 years. Not that this is a stationary document that perhaps won't move and won't evolve, but that we will refer to hold our health partners to account and to outline the commitments that we've made to our children and families. I'll hand over to Vic and then we'll open to questions, Chair.
The strategy, of course, responds to the statement of action from 2021 as part of SEND, but also looks to the SEND Commission, chaired by supposed to make and this work and it's going to be used on. Subsequent to that, there was a significant amount of work to design a scope of action work together also see midway through the development of the SEND made the improvement plan. It was changing national policy in both SEND but also terms of provision. We also saw the infection framework earlier this year as well. So we took a pause during the development of the strategy to let those changes into the strategy we see before you. And that was received very well by our citizens. Supporting us, sharing us. So there's been a considerable amount of work over a considerable amount of time. That's been very positive feedback. With progress that is lying in this direction. Just to note in terms of outcomes on the area, towards pages. it's very, seen very well by our sector improvement partner. That's types of strategies, how we're measuring outcomes, how are we assessing change over 5-year period strategies. The intention will be to launch a survey, series of engagements post launch of strategy. So today, baseline for where we are, it's point in 2023, but also pieces of annually to track progress and look at the impacts and lived experience on this strategy. So,
Are there any questions? I've got Councillor Neil Wilson. Okay.
Yes, more a set of observations, Chair. We're asked to obviously agree a strategy and note, obviously, with strategies, there's a policy development phase and an implementation phase. And my cabinet colleague has rightly indicated that nothing can be set in stone, not least because of legislative changes that the interim director has highlighted. But 822 quite rightly refers to the local authorities and health bodies. So I'm speaking as the cabinet member for health. The local authorities and health bodies must have arrangements. That's been in place since the Children and Families Act of 2014, section 26. So it is a joint thing in terms of just that point around education, health care plans. I note as a school governor, as well as a member of this council, that we have made terrific progress with those children, as indicated on 288, with their attainment, those in receipt of education healthcare plans. We were at a low base, but that attainment is reassuring. But I just think it's incumbent on myself and anybody else, really, if we're talking about the increase in attainment across the early years, it's quite clear the early intervention work, because this is around both identification of need, but also delivery of need. There's been, as it says on 289, second bullet point, since 2019, notable increase in attainment outcomes of pupils with education healthcare plans across early years, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 4, post 16, and that's to be welcome, because we are a 0 to 25 service in law. And I think it's important. We often forget that it's those early years that are important. No pun intended, the health warning in a way is that on page 296, in terms of the local area partnerships with intervention and the identification that I've already referred to, third bullet point says, build capacity within schools and settings, so colleges post 16, to deliver the graduated response to increase access to specialist services, including speech and language therapy, sometimes known as SALT if you're a school governor. There is a national shortage, but also a local shortage. CAMS, and we are very cognizant, the cabinet member for children's services, yourself, Councillor Garfield, that there is a real issue about the access to the community adolescent mental health services, occupational therapy and educational psychology service, all of which have real staffing issues. So I think it's incumbent on us to see this as a joint effort in terms of making certain that, because the recommendation is to note that this will come before the Integrated Care Board. All 7 of the local authorities in the North East footprint are actually asking for more money with increased populations and resources. So there'll be competing resources. And I think it's just incumbent on us to note that, because we're noting it at this point. It's not to influence the strategy, but it may sometimes be some robust discussions have to be held with its policy and implementation at delivery level. Thank you.
Okay. Right, any response to the comments?
I completely agree with my colleague. I don't think Councillor Wilson was entirely asking for a response. It wasn't a question, but I do agree, Councillor Wilson, that the early intervention settings across the board and the fact that there is a shortage of some of those specialist professionals does present a challenge. We did have a conversation at scrutiny last week, and I've mentioned this in the department before, but the strategy is having to plan for an improvement that takes place immediately, an immediate improvement But we've already, as you mentioned, and you've worked with Councillor Wilson, seen among the response from our families about the SEND service, because that's what they deserve and what we have a duty to provide. But it also needs to plan for the long term. So there is a mention in the strategy of how we as a borough can partner with certain institutions that are anchored here and that we have close relationships with, to ensure that in the medium to long term, we're able to produce those qualified professionals in our anchored institutions that can then come and work for our various health services and for our local authority, and be those therapists, those educational psychologists. Those are the partnerships that we're building with many of the institutions that have invested in our borough with regard to further and higher education. And that is something that we're very cognizant of for our medium and long-term strategy.
Yeah, okay, Councillor Sarah Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I don't think we should underestimate the actual real amount of work that has gone into this. If you look back maybe 2 years ago, our SEND services were at rock bottom. And, you know, if we can get it to where it is today, then there is real hope for the future. And working, you know, we shouldn't also underestimate the amount of work it has taken to actually bring our partners along. You know, anybody who's been to the Parent Forum will know that that has never been a positive experience. And actually to see them and hear them at the SEND executive being positive was almost like, well, my goodness me, what's happened, like event. So I do think that we are cautious. We are not there yet. We have a long way to go. This is a really positive step. And for every child in this borough who needs our services, you know, we have to be better. And this brings us a long way. So, you know, thank you, really, because it isn't an easy job to turn a whole service around as quickly as we have, and with the quality checks in place. So thank you.
Okay, fine. Right, I am going to just page number 2. The reason set out in the report is Cabinet has recommended to 2.1 agree that the SEND and inclusion strategy was adopted for implementation. 2.2 note that the local area partners, including the council and NHS North East London Integrated Care Board, will be responsible for the delivery of the strategy once approved by Cabinet with the governance of Newham SEND Executive Board. So do we agree? Thank you very much. On to Mr. Joshua Barfield, Vic, and other officers involved. Now we're moving on to agenda item 14, which is building the health and care facilities of the future. This relates to our health and adult social care directorate. I'm going to be passed Cabinet Member for Health and Adult Social Care.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, Health and Care Space Newham is unique, it's innovative, it's a joint venture, again, between this council and a health partner, in this case, East London NHS Foundation Trust. And its creation is to build high quality health and care facilities and infrastructure within the borough. And I'm stressing within the borough because I think my latter remarks will refer to why we think this is a very important joint venture. So in an environment where NHS capital funds are limited, and it is actually quite difficult for NHS estates to actually liberate funding, it seems, at local level. But the council does have the ability to borrow through our borrowing powers for capital infrastructure. Am I getting people? Sorry, was that something?
We heard it too, don't worry.
Sorry, I just wondered which. So shall I carry on, Chair? I don't know what's going on there. So in an environment where, as I say, NHS capital funds are limited, we have the ability, in contrast, to borrow for capital infrastructure, which I think has already been referred to within this meeting. Health and Care Space Newham demonstrates what public sector collaboration can achieve for the residents. we talked earlier on in just the last report about collaboration for our young people. We are forecast to have one of the highest population growth rates in the country, and I will keep, whether it's in this forum or at the ICP, the Integrated Care Partnership, or at ICS, the Integrated Care System level generally, we are with other boroughs in the east talking about really high population growth rates, but Newham has got one of the highest population growth rates projected. So we're going to require more and more modern estate capacity. The emphasis there on modern, because some of our facilities are aging within the primary care system particularly, but also this would be a link across in the true spirit of integration, which the legislation was supposed to address, health and social care to meet current and future needs. But it does include an important point about supported accommodation. And the borough is not currently able to meet existing needs, and that's relying on out of borough provision, as in all sorts of areas in housing and in children's social care, but in adult social care, out of borough provision is relatively even more, quite considerably more expensive. So if we're building fit for purpose estates, it will allow this model of Newham Health and Care Partnership to develop integrated facilities where the residents of our borough can access primary and community health service. That is an integration that's very needed. In the East London footprint, we are talking about community health services being closely aligned more alongside social care and a wider community offer based on local needs. We've already started some of that work with, our social prescribing, and I saw that in operation at Forest Gate Surgery not so long ago. But this would be to build the facilities, the capital. It's a more seamless service for residents, and it embraces both health facilities, but being able to support our growing care needs in support of supported accommodation. I want to stress that as well. It may be branded health and care space, and health is the obvious first and most immediate need, but we do have to have growing care needs for an increasingly elderly population as well, and a demand upon supported accommodation. This was established in 2019, so it's a relatively new beast on our field of vision, as it were. But we've already developed and delivered Pontoon Dock Health Centre that has operated since February of 2021. That's already delivering a small financial surplus, but it's not yet at full capacity. What Health and Care Space Newham has also developed is an innovative approach to social value assessment. So that will be estimated to enable 1.5 million of additional social value created by the Hartley Health Centre fit out project. Hartley Health Centre, very close to where we're sitting now. So this report submits for cabinet approval the business plan that is in the exempt agenda, so I won't refer to it, but colleagues have had sight. This will enable Health and Care Space Newham to proceed with innovation, and we want to continue because we have the leverage, the more partnership work, and we can lever and have some quite considerable say in the innovative activities in collaboration with health partners, and will allow submission of a project business cases to the council to obtain necessary loan finance. The business cases will come back when they are on stream, and the report further requests approval of the Hartley Health Centre business case and revisions to the governance process. The governance process is attached as Appendix B, and I think it is just worth noting that that is an important way that we have checks and balances and open and transparent governance for these projects. So I commend this report, and I have Jason Strelitz and Simon Reed and Colin, anybody who wishes to come in from officer point of view.
Okay, Jason.
The only thing I'd add is that Cabinet will know from previous discussions, and it's in the context where there's concern over capital borrowing, that in this context, the cost of borrowing are met by the NHS, and that's been part of this model.
Okay. Would you like to add anything, Colin? No?
Simon?
Fine. Simon, would you like to add?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
All right. Any questions, colleagues? No? Okay, super. I'm going to draw everyone's attention to the recommendations. Big page number 373 in the report. So for the reasons set out, Cabinet is recommended to agree 1.1 HCSN Business Plan 2023-2026, Appendix A, and the envelope to loan finance of £1 million over that period to allow activities of HCSN to proceed. 2.1.2 to delegate authority to Corporate Director of Resources to approve that agreed funding amounts under approved HCSN business cases be transferred as loan finance to the HCSN under appropriate contractual arrangements. 2.1.3 the revised governance structure for HCSN at Appendix B, and 2.1.4 the Hartley Health Centre business case at Appendix C, and the request for loan finance of up to 8.5 million from the £30 million recommended in 2.1.1 to HCSN to complete the Hartley Health Centre development. Is that agreed, colleagues?
Agreed.
Agreed, brilliant. Now we're moving. Agenda item 15. Now this is the final is the final paper, and this is the request to procure adult and young people substance misuse services, and that's on page 391 of the agenda pack. I'm going to be introducing in the first instance Councillor Wilson to introduce.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. So it's clear that those who use drugs and alcohol include some of our most vulnerable residents. They've experienced multiple trauma, often within their lived experience, and have also significant physical and mental health needs, as well as the offending behaviour sometimes associated with these groups. If not treated and supported, that adds significant costs relating to substance misuse, including to social care and health, which is already well known to be under pressure in financial, but also in, as we alluded to earlier, in terms of its workforce strategy. But our drug and alcohol use, the drug and alcohol use also has impact on the person's family and friends, as well as the wider community. This service proposed here, and this is a re-procurement request, would be to offer treatment and support to those affected by their drug and alcohol use to support them to achieve sustained recovery. The emphasis is obviously clearly on a sustained recovery path from addiction, and to improve their health and social circumstances. And that's to be done through a public health approach. We keep mentioning a public health approach, but that's basically all the wider social determinants of a person's life. So within their own family network, if there is, or whether that's disconnected from family and friends. It is also about the social setting, the housing needs, which we're very often related to, but also any dependency of children, which is a crucial issue as well. We're having an improved focus on ensuring that it's culturally competent service. There is an important issue within the most diverse part of the UK that we have a culturally diverse and a service which is culturally sensitive, but is also dealing with the cultural aspects around the stigmatization of drug use or alcohol use within our communities. And that is across a lot of communities that there is stigma. So it's got to be sensitively handled, but culturally appropriate. So with a specialist resource available, but also harnessing the power of our very important voluntary community and faith sector, which does quite a tremendous outreach work where people come for one service possibly, and then they may disclose, or it is probably obvious that they are dependent on drug or alcohol. So emerging research shows that the impact of the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns associated with them, that drinking is on the increase, and that is shown through national figures. there's an increased need for services. These services are very well used, and there's a rise in obviously the ill health associated with alcohol and sadly deaths associated with alcohol. So it's important that we have a strong prevention offer to residents so that they don't present, and they often are presenting at the A&E of the local hospital or at GP surgeries or, you know, in our libraries or anywhere else where they're desperately seeking some help. So the service currently achieves outcomes better, and this is important to stress, that our outcomes currently are better than or comparable to regional and national performance, where it was in a really sorry state, the whole service of drug and alcohol abuse. But we've turned it around, and the focus on this procurement is to maintain that level of good outcomes or continuing, but without being complacent, to develop the high quality offer along the lines I've outlined, with an embracing extra flexibility to deliver against, and we have to put this in, obviously, current and future central government funding. We are anticipating some streams, but sometimes we've had to have some very judicial use of funding streams that come on and they are time limited. So this report seeks cabinet approval to re-procure the adult and young people's substance misuse services. It would be remiss of me to say that we are not including within this young people, because sadly they are entering into sometimes drug and alcohol abuse at an earlier stage, not least because of, you know, the vapes and all sorts of issues around smoking leading on to other issues in later life. So this report seeks this Cabinet's approval to re-procure the adult and young people's substance misuse services, and it would be a contractual term of 5 years with your agreement, with an option to extend for up to 2 years, obviously with the usual caveats of quality assurance and monitoring. And the new service we are envisaging will commence on the 1st of July of next year. Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, are there any questions, colleagues? No? Okay, anything from officers? No, all right, fine. So we're going to now move on to the recommendations. Page number 394, 2.1, for the reasons set out in the report and its appendices, Cabinet is recommended to agree to a competitive procurement exercise through an open tender procedure for the delivery of the adult and young people substance misuse services for a contractual term of 5 years, with an option to extend for 2 years. So that's 1 + 1. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
And then I just wanted to also note that there are 2 exempt appendices, item 15 and item 18. But you've just got to note the exempt appendices. Agenda item 9 as listed as item 15. That's the main works building contract for Canning Town Old Library. And agenda item 18, which relates to agenda item 14, and that's the exempt appendices for agenda item 14, building the health and care facilities of the future. Can we just note those exempt appendices?
Noted. Thank you.
Before we conclude, I just wanted to also of former councillor who was conferred the honour of alderperson or alderwoman for the London Borough of Newham and freedom of the borough. Councillor Marie Cully was a long-standing councillor for some 16 years, representing the people and communities of Canning Town North. And we have issued a statement on behalf of all members and the council this morning. The funeral will be taking place on Friday, and I'm sure all colleagues here will join me in conveying our profound sadness and condolences to Brian Collier, who was also a former councillor and former civic mayor of Newham Council, and the wider family during this desperately sad time. She was a wonderful individual, contributed her life and her heart to the people of Newham. And it's a really sad moment, but we obviously pray for comfort to the family during this difficult and challenging time. And long may she be remembered for her contributions to our borough. Thank you very much, colleagues, and I wish you a good day.
Thank you, Chair.